Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
It is so lovely to see you.
Well, I am equally enamored by being able to see, yes, virtually, but see you sitting there in front of me after so many years. It's awesome. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Oh, thank you. And to you, today is a very important day for you and your family. And so wanting to thank you for the time that you're taking to be with us.
Thank you. Yes, it's on my Jewish side,
Mhm.
the probably highest holiday of
Yeah.
all of our holidays. So yes, but I'm so happy to be here doing this and talking to you. Um, Mostly because yes, as soon as I saw that it was a request from you, I absolutely wanted to make it happen. But also, you're doing such important work, and I think
Mm.
there are really great intersections
Mm.
uh, to meet at because we've been on our own paths doing
Mm.
important work, and it's really nice to have the opportunity to come together to talk about it.
Mm, agreed. And it's so important when we talk about sharing stories and telling stories for legacy and to be able to carry those stories forward. So let's start with you, if that's okay, Jennifer. Could you tell us a little bit about your own story, about what you do, and and we'll start there.
Okay, so my name is Jennifer Podemski. I was born and raised in Toronto. My father is Jewish from Israel and with ties, back to Poland, where my grandfather is from. And my mother is from Muscopetang First Nation in Saskatchewan. And they met in Toronto, and that's how I got here. And I have always, since I can remember, been in the performing arts.
Mm.
Uh, as you know,
Mhm.
a dancer for a long time,
Mhm. Mhm.
and an actor. But early on in my career as an actor and a performer, very much recognized that there was a very serious problem with misrepresentation,
Mm.
underrepresentation of Indigenous people and stories. And
Mm.
I moved into producing and creating content like in my early 20s. So, like, I was 25 when I opened my first production company, and now I'm 50. So, it's been 25 years that I've been doing this work behind the camera as a
Right
producer
on.
and content creator.
Right on. Yeah, and every day's a gift. Congratulations on 50.
Thank you.
Looking good. Looking good, Jennifer. Your recent project, Little Bird, is the story of an Indigenous woman removed from her home during the 60s scoop and adopted by a Jewish family. And she sets out on a journey to find her birth family and uncover truths, right? The hidden truths of her past. Um, why did you feel compelled to tell this story?
Well, this particular story was brought to me in 2015 at a time when I had, been doing, I was already familiar, very familiar with the 60 Scoop, very familiar with
Mm.
child welfare. I had come across many people's stories in my travels and in many of my shows, like The Seventh Generation, which was the first TV series that I did. Met a lot of 60 Scoop survivors in
Mm.
that show. And so at the time when this sort of loose concept came to me, it was through producers at a company called Resolution Pictures out of Montreal, who I had known and worked with before, and they know my background, so you know, they kind of asked me, what do you know about this, and would this interest you to dramatize a story like this? And I was like, as it happens, I am currently working with a couple of different versions of this experience. It's not my own experience, but I think it's a very important
Mm.
experience to amplify from an Indigenous perspective. I had I had written another show called Unsettled, which did focus on a drama series focus on a 60 scoop survivor who went home. Very different kind of story, but I had been working on that at the time. So it really fell in line with everything that I was hoping to create, and also the fact that I had never really worked on any project that allowed me to explore or share my personal experiences at that, intersection of Jewish identity and in being Indigenous. So I'm not sure if I immediately said yes, but I was like, yeah, I think I'm interested in knowing more about it. Um, so we met and I came on board in the very late 2015 and we started, writing the very loose concept and it really just it grew from there. 2015 is a long time ago. So yeah, it was a long journey, but that is how I came to tell the story. And as I really, uh, developed this concept and these characters, and when Hannah Moscovich came on board and our team began to like become very strong creatively, I I really kind of doubled down and looked into my own story. And actually during this process of development, and I think it was during COVID actually, when early COVID, when we were still like in lockdown, I got a box of stuff from my dad and it was like archives that I had never seen. And I found the paperwork from the social workers when I was taken, because I was taken from my mom in the hospital. She had just turned 17, was a single Indigenous woman. My dad was, they weren't really together at the time. And I had never seen this paperwork. So it never really felt, because I don't remember it, it never felt that real to me. But this paperwork was like literally in front of me. It had the social worker's name on it. It had like the date. It was so transactional. It felt so weird to look at, especially at a time when I was, writing a story about this. And I had known that the story through my mom's experience is that, I was taken into foster care. And then there was a social worker who she worked with who was like, I guess, entering retirement. And she said, I'm not going to let this happen. You can't do this. There's no reason for you to do this. I'm going to make it my last kind of effort at Children's Aid to get your daughter back. So she got me back. I think I was only gone a little while, a few months. But my mom did get me back, and just finding the paperwork
Mm.
was so profound at the time. And I was like, oh my God, what a weird time to find this paperwork.
Wow.
How strange is it that my dad out of nowhere found this box of archives, and I guess he was moving because he got married during COVID, and um I guess he wanted to just get rid of stuff from the past. And yeah, it was just a really weird time.
To talk about intersection, and I can recall one of our colleagues, who was an artist, and she shared with us that our people, Indigenous peoples, will have been asleep for a long time, and it will be the artists to wake the nation. And I see, I see the intersectionality of the paths that we take, the paths that our ancestors had to take, and that strength. And I see, even when you found that paperwork, the legacy that you leave. And true to form, Jennifer, you've been a champion of Indigenous storytelling from the very start of your career. You've inspired many storytellers. Why is it so important to tell First Nation, Inuit, and Métis stories? through the use of TV, film, to help further our goals with truth before reconciliation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the answer, is working towards unearthing and uncovering the truth. And that there's sort of different, for me, there's always been different compartments to that work and the effort of, storytelling and the why behind it. And I guess part of it is that in front of the camera, at least from my experience, being in front of the camera from a pretty young age, like 17 to like 21, having all of the it was a privilege, and it was a time of Indigenous renaissance, I guess, in film and television in the early 90s. And it was a privilege for me to be a part of that awakening. But at the same time, I was very aware that I was very powerless in front of the camera. And I was powerless to like the racism that I saw on set. I was powerless to, the storytelling being not necessarily authentic, still impactful, but not authentic. And just feeling generally powerless, especially with casting, because we often work with a lot of non-Indigenous people who were playing Indigenous roles. And I just recognize like how weird it is to tell, not weird, it's harmful. It's very harmful to be in a group of actors who are telling a story, and let's say it's something, Indigenous, that will later go on and do interviews in the press. And of course, will be answering questions around like Indigenous issues. And when you're non-Indigenous, clearly you won't answer those questions because you have no frame of reference for them. So every interview lost because of, poor casting or in authentic casting was another step backwards for us to uncover the truth. Because, the work of uncovering truth it's comprised of introducing audiences to stories through a variety of authentic perspectives of Indigenous people, depending on where people are from. So, you need the support within the system to be able to tell a variety of stories. And in order to undo the propaganda that has perpetuated across time, like since the beginning of cinema, that has led society to believe that we are, as Indigenous people, subordinate, we are less than everybody else. That that is something we see across the education systems, across justice, across healthcare. And in many ways, like that is just a narrative that has been cemented over time in the popular consciousness because of what we've seen on TV. So the work being done with stories is to undo those narratives, rebuild the new ones, but it's an effort that has to be, that has to be attacked from all perspectives, all angles, right? When you think about casting, it's like, why would that matter? Well, it matters because at the end of the day, that person is doing press. And at the end of the day, that person doing press is going to impact someone reading this article. And if they sound uninformed or are uninformed, then the goal of truth is being further thwarted. So it's like a multifaceted I think uh, it's the work we're doing is multifaceted, and that's part of the reason I think why it's been so challenging and has felt like an uphill climb for many people in all sectors, is that
Mm.
there isn't a lot of support. There hasn't been in the past a lot of support because the thing we're working towards is happening at a time when those cemented narratives and belief systems are still in place.
Mm.
So, regardless of your sector, if you are an Indigenous person living in this current reality, working in these, across any sector, you are facing the same exact challenges and barriers that anyone else is facing in any sector. So the things I talk about from the screen sector perspective is the same thing that someone working in any system would be experiencing.
I quite agree with you. And I think of, just this analogy sort of setting the stage or setting that, preparing that protocol, to come to that place that is culturally safe. And when we're talking about culturally safe, we're talking about that protection as well, that protection of that story and of that tradition. And in terms of telling stories, I picture you, and I picture you on set, and I can imagine the crew that's around you, and I know you talk about how you personally balance telling the stories from your community with the harm that can be caused from sharing these truths, and this vulnerability in this time. Can you talk to us about how you help the actors during this vulnerability, the crew, while filming stories that deal with topics of genocide, violence, colonialism?
Well, on Little Bird, what that this was really the first time, and I really advocated for it because I had had experiences in the past where I've tried to implement safety mechanisms that would support, the crew and the talent and the people who are reckoning with these realities, right? That we're still living in. It's not like this is a historical thing we're talking about in the past. We currently, as Indigenous people, live in a state of colonial violence.
Mhm.
Anyone knows that who knows an Indigenous person. So I really advocated for having a therapist on set and having a medicine tent, like a safe space for, processing a lot of this. You can imagine, if you've seen the show, this is our family. These are our grandparents, these are our parents, this is our family. And every Indigenous person like knows that. So to have knowing that you have a place on set where you can, talk to a trauma informed therapist, if you need extra support with elders or any kind of ceremony, we were able to address that. But most importantly, knowing that the support is there, I think is half the work,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Creating safe spaces to do this work is very difficult, but again, not different from any other sector because we are all fighting the same, oppressive system. And we are all trying to speak our voices in spaces where our voices have been silenced. So the safer the space to do those things, the more effective it will be for everyone, and those spaces it's not just designed for Indigenous people. It's also, in this show in Manitoba, I don't even have to tell you if you work in the field that
Mm.
we were also working with a lot of people who had lived that legacy on the other side of history. or who were siblings of adopted, you know, Indigenous kids. So there was, yeah, I don't know that we achieved, the height of, what I would consider the ultimate safe space. I just think we were, we carved out enough time and energy and space to be able to offer what we could.
Mm. That that very much is reminds me of um, my understanding of my soul's journey. You know, in my wake, it's leaving. Um, you know, all my relations in a better place than when we found it. And it's so strong when you say that we have a commonality to resist a narrative that is very much based on a hegemonic sort of oppressive view, and that comes in our work with education and child welfare. And it's not lost on me as an educator and someone who works in child welfare that those are the first two sections of calls to action within the Truth and Reconciliation document. And it's overwhelming, and every day the work is collective. And so thank you, Niawe Miigwech. Thank you for your work that you are doing. And then one last question for you. What to you is truth and reconciliation?
Well, it's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like, I understand why those two items were connected, but it has to be truth and then reconciliation, because they don't happen at once.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like what firstly, truth and reconciliation is not for Indigenous people. This is the work of non-Indigenous people. And we are still in a place where the load of truth and reconciliation and the weight lands on us as Indigenous people, when the spirit and intent of it is that it is taken by our allies and our neighbors, our non-Indigenous allies and neighbors. So for me, truth and reconciliation is a promise that our non-Indigenous family members, neighbors, community members, fellow citizens will make to us and all Indigenous people their promise to bear the load and do the work, because it is not on us to reconcile anything. The truth of it is to acknowledge that we have participated willingly or unwillingly in the perpetuation of systemic racism and colonial violence. And now, once you know the truth about that, it's your turn
Mm-hmm.
to reconcile with your own history, your own legacy, your own family members, and build build a better future in whatever way you can.
Oh, yeah. Jennifer, to you, to your family, to this beautiful day that we share, and have a wonderful day. And thank you so much for taking the time and speaking
Thank
with
you.
us, and in the commonality of the work. Thank you so much, Niawe.
Thank you. Have a good
Take
day.
care. Be well.
Thank you.